Recently, in a comment thread, somebody was casting suspicion on the fact that the fear of racism and the perception of racism played a role in preventing the numerous accounts of child abuse up and down the country from being investigated properly. So I've put this little video together in order to show some of the statements of some of the professionals involved regarding the fear of being seen as racist. Yet this is also a critique of the BBC and how they neglected to mention how the unholy alliance of the new laws on perception and political correctness allowed these abuses to go unchallenged for years. They are at the core of how this was allowed to happen.
And after countless dead ends, Andrew Norfolk finally found someone willing to talk to him on the record. A senior police officer heading a major investigation.
He talked about having arrived in a new division, and it was almost, he said, as though there was a box underneath the desk into which every case that was too difficult went, and there in that box was clear evidence over a period of years of what had been happening to girls in that town. And that was a town where basically the Pakistani community was 4 streets. It was tiny. And yet it was even a generational thing there, where you had fathers who had been doing this to the mothers of young girls who were now being groomed and abused by these men's sons. He told me, to colleagues in the northwest of England, and he said, a senior police officer in Lancashire said, listen, don't turn that stone. If you turn that stone, you have no idea what's going to come out.
The police faced a difficult challenge. They carried out raids and increased surveillance to try and root out terror cells. At the same time, they had to maintain social cohesion and make sure that any action they took wasn't perceived as racist.
So just to outline for you here, the BBC have just suggested that the Home Office have shelved investigations into child exploitation by Pakistani Muslims through the fear of justice being perceived as racist. That is to say, the Home Office sacrificed justice through the fear of being perceived as racist.
Operation Augusta was a full-on major incident team investigation when I went off work. I came back to work in September and the job had died a death. It had just gone, fizzled out, shut down. I couldn't believe it. I was incredulous. This was systematic, organised sexual abuse. They weren't just picking one child out of the ether. These were groups of children that they were being targeted, and it was like a production line, you know, one and then another. So what was happening to all these children now? Who was dealing with this kind of crime? Nobody. It was being buried.
But there was a pattern, one that risked reigniting delicate race relations, particularly in the north.
White and Asian youths.
The troubles in the northwest are integrally linked with the success of the British National Party in the last election.
There was absolutely no getting away from the facts that the victims were young white children and that the offenders were older Pakistani men. Once those facts became understood by the powers that be, I think that they made a conscious decision that they weren't going to open up that box. It was allowed to slide away and it was buried.
The abuse took place in plain sight, and yet professionals chose to look the other way and say nothing.
Okay, so we're going from 2005 here, when Maggie Oliver's cases were shelved, to 2012, when the Rotherham trials are concluding. And there have been thousands of rapes by grooming gangs between the years.
Tonight, after 11 weeks, the case which centres on Rochdale involving the grooming and abuse of teenage girls has finally ended.
Including rape and trafficking. The victims were girls aged
The grooming gang said through their lawyers that they were in the dock due to racism.
I remember vividly the day the verdicts came in, and I remember sitting in my front room on my own, watching Steve Hayward walk out onto the steps at Liverpool Crown Court and give a statement on behalf of Greater Manchester Police.
Okay. This has been a fantastic result for British justice. These victims have been through the most horrendous of crimes, and I just want to commend their bravery in relation to the ordeal they've had to go through. These are the most vulnerable in our society, and they have been preyed upon by adults who should know better.
There were so many feelings going through me when I saw him on those steps, and it crystallised everything I was feeling about the whole on-street grooming.
I would also like to thank my officers for the professional...
He had been in charge of child protection at the time of Operation Augusta. He was the man I had face-to-face meetings with. He knew full well what on-street grooming was. You saw Victoria's photograph. You saw her letter. You knew that Operation Augusta was a live and running job. You knew what the offender profile was. You read my report. You were part of the officers who authorised it to go to the major incident team, and you were one of the ones who dropped that job.
Thank you very much.
This man, who was part of shelving the case in 2005, has now been honoured by the Queen with a Distinguished Service Cross.
If Greater Manchester Police had followed what we knew to be happening in relation to Operation Augusta back in 2004 and 5, I know 100% that this kind of crime would not have escalated to the proportions that we now see. As a community, as a country, we're trying to play catch-up with a crime that has become frighteningly, it's epidemic proportions.
Nobody in the Pakistani community wanted to talk about these issues. Nobody seemed to want to help. Many people were coming to me and saying to me, oh yes, well this is what the BNP were doing in Bradford, this is what the BNP were doing in Keighley, this is all a far-right conspiracy about demonising minority communities.
But there was a small number who either very openly or perhaps whisper, you know, sort of were saying things that perhaps I was something of a racist, and that was very upsetting. I'm absolutely convinced it was a political correctitude gone mad. You know, there was absolutely no reason for it. I was rocking the multicultural boat, but how do you get changes without talking about it?
Okay, so we've just seen the Member of Parliament, Anne Cryer, expressing that she was very upset to be called a racist by her peers, and that it was political correctness gone mad, and that the only way that we can resolve these issues is if we talk about them. Yet, in the next clip, we hear from a victim's father who says the only people that will talk about this are the BNP. Yet Anne Cryer goes on to call the BNP racist.
A few months down the line, they decided that they weren't going to pursue it anymore. I knew that knickers had been recovered, and I knew that DNA evidence had been recovered, and that basically the semen of one of these animals was in her knickers. It's a smoking gun, that's red-handed, simple as that. And I don't think that any sane human being could disagree with me. Ooh, how can, you know, how did the semen get there? It was the Crown Prosecution Service who dropped it. They said that my daughter, she probably wouldn't be believed in court. She wasn't a credible witness. It's just ridiculous. You know, I know very well that there was an excellent case there. I was totally devastated. You can't be anything else. How on earth could this be allowed to happen? About 3 or 4 days after, a leaflet come through the door from the BNP. It said things that just made sense, really. I gave them a ring. A gentleman come out, and, you know, I mean, I'd said what happened to my daughter, and they basically said to me right away, well, you know, we know about this. They were listening to me. No one else had listened to me, but they even knew that was on about, and they knew entirely about the whole problem. Everyone else had said there isn't a problem, or just denying it existed, or you can't say that, that's racist. I joined on the spot.
One of the speeches for which I'm accused of inciting racial hatred was talking about the endemic problem of heroin and grooming of young girls. I think it's very important that these issues are got out and are discussed. I will keep on telling the truth. My colleagues in the British National Party will keep on telling the truth. And however many of us they jail, however long they jail us, we will keep on telling the truth until the truth prevails.
I never thought he would win, but I felt that it was going to do a great deal of damage to race relations. Working class people on small estates were being indoctrinated by these racist lies.
So we have Anne Cryer expressing that she was very upset to be called a racist by her own party when talking about these issues, who then goes on to call the BNP racist for talking about these issues. Just how politically correct is that? Playing the race card and creating a climate where people won't talk through fear of being called racist. Okay, so do you think that justice should be put on hold so we don't offend the community that belongs to the people who will be prosecuted?